Welcome to Mac Football Forever. I'm Alex. That's Caleb. We're finishing up the State of the MACtion series. We got a couple episodes left. We got Bowling Green right now. We got Central Michigan coming up later in the week. We're almost there. We're almost there, Caleb. We got to finish up with these teams that, I don't know. Do we want to talk about these two? Do we want to talk about Bowling Green today? I mean, Bowling Green's kind of suck to talk about, but I don't know. I guess I kind of like diving into like figuring out why they're bad and why they could get better or not.
Yeah, there's not really a ton to talk about with Bowling Green unless you're talking about why they're bad and what it's going to take to get them back to, Falcon fast years, which we're really not all that far removed from. It's kind of crazy to think just how good the Falcons were just 5-6 years ago. So, a bad coaching hire, which we can all agree that Coach Jenks was terrible coaching hire. Put them in this spot, and they're just trying to fight to dig back out of it. And they've got the resources in the area in that part of the state. We've talked before about recruiting and what BG is capable of doing in Michigan and other parts of the country where they've had success before too. So, there's ways to get back to being good, or just being competitive, which is where they got to be first before they can be good.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because you do really expect like the results to happen after a set amount of time. But just because they don't win a title or win a division over 4 years, that's not how it all happens. That's the way you want it to happen in the macro sense. But when you actually do look at these teams and you kind of do break them down, why did they lose these games? Why did they have these bad streaks? Are they recruiting well? Are they recruiting poorly? Are they running the ball well or not? What's up with the defense? These are all things that we have to figure out with teams like Bowling Green, because they were, they won 3 MAC titles in the start of this decade, the first half of this decade, or last decade, I should say. And then what happened? 5 losing seasons in the latter half of the decade. 0-5 season in 2020. Yeah, 2020 was, the year that it was. But Bowling Green has seen the best and the worst that the MAC had to offer in just such a short amount of time. And so I can understand that fan base is rightfully confused and just annoyed and upset, because they're Bowling Green fans are just like any other MAC fans. They're strong and passionate, and they're small and they're mighty. But Bowling Green has a good identity, and those fans should want to see more out of their teams. And what they're getting right now is it's just incredibly bad. That's a program that's made good coaching hires, and for 1 or 1.5 bad coaching hires to happen, I guess, like, it's crazy to notice like how far back it has taken Bowling Green.
You look at like what they have in terms of the type of caliber of players that were there just a few years ago. And, there's big names that stick out. I mean, even Scotty Miller was just, a very short time ago. But you look back to like Lewis at wide receiver and Matt Johnson and those types of guys.
Eric Dieter.
Yeah, Eric Dieter. And there's really no reason they can't get back to that with a couple nice recruiting moves. And so this team is super young. They lost some very good transfers that were young this year. And so that's not a good sign for where they're headed. But again, with the amount of young players, they're in a similar boat as NIU, I would say, in that they both are trying to make what they have work, that are a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. And that's got to be your plan going forward, has got to be to develop those guys, because you're not going to have time to get the 2022 class and try and raise them up slowly unless there's just no expectations for the Falcons. Yeah. It's the guys that are here now need to make the difference, that needs to start happening in the next, maybe not even this year, but like by 2022, it absolutely should.
So I guess that was a prolonged intro, but we do have 5 points that we need to get into, and we kind of covered all of our bases a little bit. Mm-hmm. We're going to get repetitive nonetheless anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But the first point I want to make is that, the 2020 season, yes, it was hard for literally all 126 or 27. I don't know how many teams had it.
I think 30 now, I think.
Well, yeah, but like not all of them played. Like UConn didn't play.
Oh, true. True.
Everybody that doesn't matter. Anybody that said we're going to have a football season, you barely had a football season unless you're Alabama. And Bowling Green barely had a football season, went 0-5. The bad start, pandemic or not, it was sort of expected. We said that, let's go over the 4 coaches that Bowling Green's had over the 2010s. Dave Clawson, he won a MAC title and was a long build-up. Went from, I think he had an 0 team his first year. No, it was like a 2-win team, but he built it up to a MAC title. Dino Babers, he was there for 3 years, won 2 titles there, and he changed things to be like a very fast approaching offense. They went Falcon fast. Does that sound familiar at all? He had quarterbacks and players that were from the Clawson roster, but he still added his own. You said Roger Lewis. We said Garrett Dieter. I think Travis Green was David Clawson guy. James Kanapke, you got to remember him. He stepped up when Matt Johnson had a hip injury early in 2014, something like that.
2014, yeah, I think.
And so Bowling Green was looking really good. Like you said, 3 MAC titles over 5 years, basically. And then Bowling Green made a bad hire in Mike Jinks. And it's not, I don't think Jinks is a terrible coach. I just think Jinks is a terrible head coach for Bowling Green. Total different thing. But still, Bowling Green, the people in charge of making good hires, made a horrible hire. And he just kind of just took Bowling Green in a direction that he wanted to have Bowling Green go in, but it was not in Bowling Green's best interest, obviously, moving forward. He got canned pretty early with 3 losing seasons in 3 years. Scot Loeffler's come in. He's not, and Scot Loeffler's, a guy that's worked with a bunch of people like Urban Meyer and Tom Brady and Brian Greasy and all that stuff. But, still losing seasons under him, just 2 straight losing seasons with him. And Bowling Green has won 55 games, won 70 and lost 72 times in the 2010s. I'm just not surprised that in 2020 we saw an 0-5 season, even though they beat Toledo in 2019. It still just was not a roster that was built for success heading into the year. Moving forward, hopefully, they get better, but it's, again, just another long rebuild.
At the end of the day, if you're a Bowling Green fan, you're just going to have to get used to the fact that this team's still not going to turn it all around this year. And I don't know that you shouldn't have any expectations, because you still have to expect them to get better. If you don't, then why is this coaching staff here? But I don't know. It's hard to say. Just there's really not a lot going for them right now.
Yeah, and point 2, looking at 2020, focusing on only the 0-5 season, sure, it was expected, but man, did it have to be that bad? Did it really have to be that bad? Like, on average, the team allowed 45 points per game, and had it not been for Kansas' 46 points allowed per game, it would have been the worst in the country. Had the worst rush defense, and offensively, it should have been the worst offense in the nation with 11.4 points per game. The reason why it wasn't the worst is because UMass somehow figured out to be a 3-point per game team. That is, man,
well, they only played one game, didn't UMass? I was going to make fun of them for that earlier. 1 game or 2 games.
Stupid UMass. It's your fault the coronavirus exists.
I mean, I look back at the Ohio game that was just so incredibly not competitive. It was 2 different levels of football being played there. One Division I college football, the other it's hard to say. I mean, at least they put points on the board and whatnot, but just a huge discrepancy against an Ohio team that was decent, but they weren't amazing or world beaters or anything. And to get skunked like that, and to get beat down by Akron, Akron's improved, but they aren't amazing.
Right.
So
yeah. And they hired their head coach at the exact same time. What gives, and Tom Arth isn't the guy that, and we're going to talk about Scot Loeffler later, but Tom Arth didn't come in with that pedigree of I worked with Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow. Oh, I worked with Tom Brady. Oh, I worked with all these people. He's I came in from Chattanooga and I kind of know the place. I'm from Cleveland, and Loeffler he should have higher expectations, but yeah, like you said, if that's the game where, and we talked about it in the Akron episode earlier, but if that's the game that separated the two, separated the shit out of them.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. It's bad.
Moving forward, we kind of brushed a little bit. Bowling Green is a little bit young. If we're kind of focusing on the 2021 roster, and if this is the roster that hopefully builds on the team later on. It's okay. I mean, there are pieces here and there, but looking at the losses, like a lot of the important, good, skilled positions on offense, they're all gone because of the portal.
Yeah.
And the piece that we're returning, I mean, quarterback is Matt McDonald, but he completed fewer than 50% of his passes. They got a couple experience, not experienced, but talented freshmen, hyped up freshmen that one's local and Riley Keller, one's distant, Tucker Melton. He's from Alabama. Maybe they can come in and do something. Terrian Stewart, he was the only one to score any rushing touchdowns out of that running back group. Mm-hmm. They got some young guys across the defense like Deotta Burns, Caleb Biggers, Darren Anders. Kobe Coleman's a senior, and he's the only all-MAC guy that's coming back to Bowling Green this year. He was just a third-team linebacker past couple of years. They have capable guys, and Bowling Green, to its credit, there's been a little bit of fluctuation, but the recruiting's been fairly decent over the past decade. If Toledo and Western and sometimes NIU is usually, or in Miami, I have to say, is usually in like the top 3 or 4 spots. Bowling Green's usually 4th, I'd say. And that's the level that, they're good at and they can stick to and they can still improve from. But, I mean, they were recruiting that well when they were doing good and when they were doing poorly.
Yeah.
So hopefully it matters later on. But right now, I'm just not seeing it.
I have at least taken a little bit of notice that, like following some of the people who tweet about BG Sports, there's like some local big linemen getting signed up from them. So I'm hoping that that's a point of, I guess, improvement for them, and that, that they can be really steady and maybe one of the better offensive line groups, and just basing that on recruiting Northeastern Ohio talent, or just Northern Ohio talent in general, not Northeastern necessarily. But yeah, I mean, if they're going to be amazing again, it's going to come from having excellent skill position players. And that's probably going to be the difference.
You mentioned people that tweet about Bowling Green athletics, and I just want to say something. I didn't put it in the notes. Not like, on purpose or even on accident, but I just didn't put it in the notes. But I do have one important thing to say. Fuck the Toledo Blade. Like, fuck you.
Yeah,
fuck the Toledo Blade.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Point 4. Reasons to be patient. I don't have too many reasons. I don't have too many reasons for Bowling Green fans to be patient, but you do have to be patient. And if I have any reason to be optimistic for this team, it's just so I can get through the next couple of minutes in this episode. Number 1, Scot Loeffler, he did beat Toledo his first year there. And it's not just, they suited up on one Saturday and they defended Dwight Perry Stadium against Toledo in a game where the Rockets were, going off memory, I think they were expected to win by 17. I think that was the spread.
They were playing good football at that point too. They were playing really good football at that point.
Yeah, in Bowling Green, they beat them. It was like, what was it, like 17-3 or something stupid? It wasn't
like 20-7, I think.
Yeah, it was crazy. That was a crazy game. And, Toledo, I remember they had like a few special teams miscues. There was like a fumbled kick return, something like that. There was just a bunch of stupid stuff that happened that Toledo could have just prevented. Like Toledo just easily could have had, they made mistakes that could have been prevented in the first place. But Bowling Green took advantage and won the game. And it mattered. And it mattered for a lot of reasons because Toledo had won the last 9 in a row. And that's a rivalry that matters so much to the MAC. It's when that rivalry is good, the MAC is better off for it. But the MAC hasn't had good reasons to show that game off, even during the good part of the decade. Even when Matt Johnson was there, even when Roger Lewis was there, even when Travis Green was there, all those guys, they still lost to Toledo. And Scot Loeffler did it with guys that Jinx couldn't do it with. And that Jinx recruited too. So sure, they lost to Toledo the next year, but you can just wipe that off and say like, oh, well, it's 2020, 2021 is going to be different. And the way that they prepared for the game, that's what I want to say. The way they prepared for the game was super unique, and that they had like a Toledo drill where, they played like the Toledo fight song at practice. And then like when you heard that, they had like hurry up, full go offense, like pads on pads, both sides of the ball, first on first. And players like were totally up for it. And so hopefully that raises the stakes of the rivalry post 2020. Yeah, if we can just ignore that year. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of victories on and off the field recruiting too. Bowling Green does a good job of recruiting, like I said, but they just have to find consistency. Even if it's just in this one series, if they go like 1-11 and beat Toledo again in 2021, I'm a happy person.
I mean, I don't know about the BG people, but yeah, you can be happy.
And sub point two, recruiting hasn't really dropped off for the team. I'm not going to get too much into that. I mean, on-field production speaks for itself. And for that, I have to say, you really have no choice of anything but to be patient, because if you look at this team, there's not a lot of upperclassmen leadership there. Like all the guys that are trying to make plays, I'm not saying making plays, trying to make plays, they're like redshirt sophomores. They're sophomores, they're freshmen.
Sure.
And they're going to be the guys that Loeffler put into the program himself, not the guys that are transferring out.
Yeah. Let's
but you have to be patient to see success, because you have no choice. That's the bottom line, unfortunately.
And so now we got to talk about Loeffler.
He's a quarterback guy, right? Supposedly a quarterback guy. So you're not allowed to say Tom Brady, and you're not allowed to say Tim Tebow, because Tim Tebow won the Heisman his sophomore year, not his senior year. Who's the best quarterback that Loeffler's coached up, I want to say, over the past decade? And here's the list. John Brantley, some guys from Temple I'm not going to list off because the passing there was awful. Also at Auburn, really. Logan Thomas, Michael Brewer, Braden Motley, Patrick Towles, Anthony Brown, Darius Wade, Grant Loy, and Matt McDonald. None of them, I don't think, hit 60%. Nope, none of them hit 60% in any of those.
Yeah, there are some really poor offensive performances, some really poor quarterbacks in a lot of those years. John Brantley was one of the guys that, like, I remember a lot of people making fun of when Florida was fun to make fun of, but now they're good again. So,
oh, they're still fun to make fun of. I mean, they threw the shoe.
That's one of the best highlights of the college football season.
That's gonna be like best of the decade.
You remember when they lost because they threw the shoe?
If I could just like spell some numbers out to you guys, I'm gonna skip Florida. I'm just gonna start straight in 2011 when he was at Temple. His quarterbacks had 126 passing yards per game, 11 touchdowns and 4 picks as a team. At Auburn in 2012, the 3 quarterbacks that he used, 57% passers, 6 touchdowns, 15 picks. Logan Thomas was okay at Virginia Tech, 15 tutties, 13 interceptions, almost 3,000 yards passing, but still only 56% passer. Michael Brewer, 2014, 6.1 yards per attempt, 16 touchdowns, 15 picks. And 2015, broken up between 2 guys, 56% passing, 24 touchdowns, 14 picks. It doesn't really get better than that, actually. I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah.
There just is not a lot of reason to believe in just the quarterbacks, which sucks, because like if you want like a quarterback coach, you want one to like do okay, like show some noticeable improvement. I haven't seen any year-to-year consistency out of any quarterback that Loeffler has touched over the past decade.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Not desirable. We spent a lot of time bagging on BG in this episode, and it feels deserved.
And I'm trying to hit on different points to like kind of spell things out. And I don't want to dog on BG. I don't hate Bowling Green. Like when Bowling Green's good, I love rooting for them because they're fun. I love rooting for Reese's Cups. It's one of my favorite candies ever. So when a team dresses like one and they look good, I'm gonna say, yeah, they taste good too. But when they're not good, I'm gonna point it out, and I'm not gonna feel too bad about it. I went to Eastern, so it's whatever.
Yeah. My thing in the end with BG is they're scraping the bottom of the barrel in a sense, and if they get better, then that coaching staff has an idea of what it's doing, or maybe had an idea and it just took a little bit to implement, or two, like, they just hit on the right guys, and they just, the recruiting moved them in the right direction, and they chose the right guys to bring into the program. They started from almost nothing at this point. So many guys left, so many young players now. For all I know, we could see some major improvement from them this year, but I think they're in a similar boat as a few other MAC teams where major improvement isn't 6 or 7 wins. Major improvement's like 3 and looking good in other games.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do better than that, phenomenal. You've done something really good.
Yeah, but, I'll take notice to 5 and 7. I'll take notice.
Yeah. If they get there, I don't know what the path is. I don't see it. But if they do, would love to revisit that at that point in time.
Yeah, please prove me wrong so I can try to learn why. Like that's what I've been trying to do over the past decade with, just like Loeffler. I've been trying to do it over the past decade to some sort of success, I guess. Again, thank you all for checking this out. This is the Bowling Green episode. We're going to talk about Central next. I'm Alex. That's Caleb. Check us out on the Twitters. Or don't.